After Arsenal recorded their historic 7-1 away win at PSV, it is time to finally talk about some key players. Now in this video we're going to talk about Jurrien Timber, who in my opinion was the best player on the pitch, especially in that first half, and I believe it is one of his best performances in an Arsenal shirt. So let's get into it. Now I am a massive fan of Jurrien Timber. I think this season he has been one of the best players for Arsenal that deserves a lot of recognition, and although of course it has been hard without Ben White, considering he came back from an ACL injury, I think he has been superb. Now despite this, I'm a little bit critical of some of the things that Timber has done, especially going forward in the last couple of months, but in this game I think that was a completely different story. Now first of all, if you look at his touch map, he was very far forward, had this quite solid line where anyone could make forward runs, usually when Neri be a little bit slightly ahead of other players, but Timber really was going very much forward and being very much confident, which is exactly what we wanted from Arsenal. And this is the major thing I think about Jurrien Timber's game. One of the problems with Arsenal is that they don't take enough risks in forward areas to actually score against teams, and although PSV definitely gave Arsenal a little bit of space, Timber definitely took that. He had a very high position from a lot of the game and was often pushing Noah Lang, who was in his man-to-man marking, in uncomfortable positions for him. Often when Arsenal attacked, Timber would either be in that central half space area, or he would go on that overlap early and be on the wide stretch of the pitch. This is important because it can get even Odegaard or Neri on the inside into that area that they love. A lot of the times you actually saw Odegaard come deeper to receive the ball and Timber go out wide, with Neri being that attacking force where Odegaard could also come over to that left hand side and work as a dual 10 with Neri, which I thought was very interesting. Now straight away in this game, these front three I think worked the best that they have before. Obviously they've had a few games now to acclimatise with each other, and it seemed like they understood and were on the same page finally. Timber would consistently make aggressive right back runs on the overlap even early or later in the phase, which was allowing Neri not to keep having to run in behind and allowing him to come deeper and pick the ball up, while Odegaard could create from anywhere where there was space, which was really good. It almost became natural where Odegaard would come back out of the press to receive the ball, Timber would make that aggressive overlap, and Neri would come inside. This also happened at moments where Odegaard would make that run and pass the ball to Timber, who would quickly shift the ball back to Neri, where he can get that space and get that shot just outside the box, which is what you want. This is obviously important because it gets Neri them shots, but also having Timber in that overlapping situation stretches PSV out and allows these spaces to actually exist in the first place. You can have Trossard do that on the left side because Trossard isn't bad in them 1v1 deeper byline moments. It's something he's actually been pretty good at recently, but I would rather have Timber do that than Neri, because even in this game I think early on Neri was struggling a little bit physically and they were getting on him quite quickly, so you need to get him that space and not keep providing him the ball, which is down to Odegaard and Timber having to create that space for him. Now these movements were brilliant all game, but especially in that second half I felt like Timber was really creating a lot of space for every player out there. Of course Mourinho would come in and be that +1 sometimes, which is very important for other players to run in behind, which we saw a lot more of Odegaard doing in this game, even Rice coming over and doing it, but Timber was more importantly doing it more than anyone. He would make them aggressive right back runs straight away, and if the ball wasn't necessarily played to him, he'd cut inside and go into that centre of the park. This made Noah Lang, who was supposed to man mark him, very confused. Did he stay with him? Did one of the centre backs pick him up? And in that second half it kept becoming a problem because Arsenal were able to get the ball quickly and switch the ball quickly out to Neri in space, who was then able to create with Odegaard coming in later. Now one of the moments where actually it really is evident that this got to them is the 6th goal where Odegaard scores. Timber makes that early run, doesn't get found and goes into them central areas. Noah Lang is in front of the defender and they don't know who should mark Timber, so at the last minute Noah Lang leaves Timber with the centre back and goes to mark Mourinho, who has found space in the centre of the park. This is too late now because Noah Lang has not picked up Mourinho quick enough and Odegaard is running off of his marker in behind where the player is not picking him up, and Mourinho is able to shift the ball quickly into Odegaard, who can run into that space with channels where Timber is pushing back that defender as well, making a run into them forward areas. This allows Odegaard to come inside and be able to shoot at goal, in which of course the goalkeeper should save it, but it goes in and it is just outside the box, and all their movements is created by Timber being that person that pins the defence back and making that run, which Arsenal had needed. But this wasn't the only time. He kept bringing Noah Lang around the whole game. He would take him centrally, which would give a lot of space out wide, and it would have to mean the fullback had to get a lot wider, and he even the attacking line for PSV would have to stretch out a lot to cover Odegaard getting into that deeper space. And it allowed Odegaard to carry the ball into that second half where we kept seeing that space open up and find them through balls, which he ended up getting one in the second half later on, even when Timber wasn't on the pitch. But at this point, PSV had kind of been stretched apart from these consistent runners from the central areas from our fullbacks, which Calafiori also did as well. I liked this because Timber in this game, you can see it by his average position, which we spoke about. He just was a lot more willing to be in them attacking spaces and stay in there, more importantly. I've been very critical of him in the attacking areas because I think he is better than he shows there. He seems a little bit conservative, doesn't want to make them passes or runs, and sometimes there's a tactical thing like Newcastle away when him and Partey didn't want to move the entire game, but sometimes it's also just down to him. Ben White loves making their overlapping runs all the time, and it just creates that little bit of space on the inside channels for Nwaneri to come inside, which anything Nwaneri needs a lot more than Saka. Saka can play out wide brilliantly, and so can Nwaneri, but Nwaneri is not at that level, so he needs to come inside because that is definitely where he is the best. So we need to see more of that. And we didn't only see this with his off the ball movements, we actually saw it a lot when he was on the ball as well. There was a few times where he won the ball back and he would drive at players down that right hand side. There was a moment where there was 2 or 3 players around him, he took them on, kept the ball, and then kept making that run around Odegaard to give him some help. Odegaard ends up losing the ball, but then he is there to pick up that second ball, shift it past the player, and then slip Odegaard in on the inside. Not only was his passing level incredibly good in this game, but the fact he was able to take people on with ease, I felt, just shows how great he is of a dribbler and how great he is with ball control, which he needs to show more in them areas which we've been wanting for a while. Don't worry about recovery time and getting back. Hopefully people like Partey will come across, and in this game I think Saliba and Gabriel did excellent at covering that ground. But more importantly, Timber himself, even when he's quite far behind the play, can recover in brilliant ways. He's a very quick player, and a lot of the times he was getting back nearly quicker than anyone else, which I would just like to see us take that risk in them forward areas. And when you are willing to be a lot more aggressive in the attack and third, when he picks up them central half space areas, he can dictate if he wants to go inside or outside and have that sort of connection with Nwaneri and Odegaard of when who is going to move deeper, who is going to receive the ball, and who's going to actually get into them spaces that are going to be created. It doesn't always have to be Nwaneri. He can be someone that baits players towards him and dribbles past him, giving that space to Timber to get in behind. But most of the time you'd want it to be Nwaneri, but it's nice to be fluid and keep things different options. Also, I thought Marino coming in from that right hand side really did balance the team quite a lot and allowed Odegaard, I think in the second half especially, to create in better areas where he was much better in that second half than he was in the first, where he was a little bit off on the ball. Now that is him in attacking areas, which is much improved, but I also felt like defensively and pressing wise, this was Timber at an excellent rate, which is not really that a surprise. First of all, I do want to talk about the pressing because it's important. Arsenal were able to suffocate PSV in with their man-to-man marking. We spoke about Lang being with Timber and Lang really getting pushed into different areas, which he didn't like. This also happened the other way around, which we wanted. Noah Lang would come deeper, come into central areas to sort of get away from Timber. Timber wouldn't always follow him. There's sometimes he'd be in that back line, especially if Calafiori's been a bit more aggressive, but often he was making sure he was aware of where Noah Lang was, and if Noah Lang came centrally or came into these areas, especially into that final third, he would track him and always be on him, not letting him get a sniff of that ball. This led to him a lot of the time making incredible tackles and being very quick in defensive transitions. Like we said before, he didn't necessarily go all the way deep with him, but he was our second phase of presser. As soon as Lang would come back and help his defense out, being a lot wider for the press, Timber would be excellent of covering that space and also covering that fullback space when Nwaneri would go inside. There's 3 or 4 times where the goalkeeper got baited into doing that lofted pass over to the left hand side, and Timber would run incredibly well and get there at a brilliant level. We've seen it before where he did it decently, I think against Leicester earlier on in the season, where we kind of baited him into that pass and he would run in for the second ball. But this time he was there every single time. They could not get out and he was constantly running and creating that space over and over again. This allowed Nwaneri not necessarily to focus too much on the pressing because he's still learning it, and he could go centrally with Odegaard to sort of push that ball out to that right hand side, in which Timber would cover that entire ground, and then Saliba and Partey would be backing him up, covering any other runners that would come and help them. Timber was definitely the best presser in this game. He was unreal, especially in that first half, at being able to cover that ground, and I can't even remember the amount of times that he won the ball back in them areas. He'd win the ball back, be physical, keep the ball, and get like a throw in for Arsenal, which ended up giving the ball back to them, which was so encouraging to see. And defensively, say, we spoke about it a little bit in the other video I did, but Arsenal really did kind of play a little bit gung-ho in this game, and especially in the wide stretches. We allowed them to have crosses in the box. PSV do get good crosses in the box, and I do think that sometimes trying to stop a team at doing their best thing is maybe a little bit pointless, because they are going to get good crosses in at the end of the day. And we really did try to manage the box and defend our box in there from Luke de Jong and all the players that could get into the box to head the ball. This meant that sometimes that Timber out on that right stretch would get out wide, he'd go up to a player, and there'd be 2 or 3 players on him overlapping. I think especially at the start when Neri really struggled to help him. I also think that might be a tactical thing with the fact we wanted him to stay a little bit further forward for that counter attack. You saw Odegaard not come back as much, and I think that may be the same option. And often they were getting overlaps on Timber. They were able to put crosses in one-on-one against him, and he didn't really have much he could do about it. They were just quite efficient at getting them crosses in. However, I still think he did a brilliant job. There was a few times where they did get a 2v1 on him and he'd do a brilliant tackle or shift the ball out, and then Neri would help, and I think Neri improved a lot more as the game went on at this. And he's undoubtedly one of the best one-on-one defenders that we have ever seen at Arsenal at the Emirates era, definitely. He was incredible at just being physical when he needed to be, being calm, which is something he needs to teach Woklzbusiness and Calafiori, because they are not really like that. They're a bit erratic, and he's just so patient in defending, and exactly what you want. He's a real leader back there, and I think in this game, considering he came back from that ACL injury and he is probably one of our best one-on-one defenders, especially out wide, is such an important thing for the team, which we haven't really had before. But we know he's incredible at defending. We know he's an incredible defending one-on-one, so we have to talk about also his efficiency in the box and in them attacking areas. We talk about how his space created some chances for other players, but also he obviously scored. Now, the first goal of the game, his second goal for the club, was a brilliant goal. We've spoke about it before, but Timber, even though he isn't the tallest, is incredible at his height, at jumping. He has got such a good leap, and it's one of the reasons why when Gabriel was out of the team, he was our main guy from the crosses, which we saw against United come into full force. And it's because he can get that massive leap on there. And with Noah Lang always trying to man mark him, he got pulled into areas, like we said, that he didn't want to be. One of them was here, where Timber, yet again, from that aggressive running, is into that attacking third with the other players. It starts with him being out of the right hand side and then coming inside when he gets into that box, making that run, and also make some risks with Woklzbusiness doing brilliant. And obviously we get it out wide, and that space is there, so Rice goes and exploits that by running there instead of just sitting at the back post and us crossing it, which I love. And this sort of aggression that Arsenal had here, we were able to get a lot of players in the box instead of that 3 players we usually have before, which was different. And Rice was able to shift that ball in from quite a good area. Great cross into that back post, where because PSV were doing this strict man-to-man marking, especially with people like Timber and Calafiori and Woklz, the fullbacks were definitely people they really focused on. Noah Lang got pulled into that area right in front of the goal, where Timber is always going to beat him in the air. He's a mismatch in that situation, and it's going to be hard for Timber to win headers against 6'4" guys, even though he is a great jumper. But against Noah Lang, that is fine, and he heads it in brilliantly for the first goal, and it's all about that off-the-ball movement. I also want to say that he was really trying to force things a lot more. I think the whole team were, but I think Timber was one of the big players. The third goal is a brilliant example. Now, I will admit this is probably one of the worst goals I've ever seen Arsenal score. Good finish by Marino, but everything else is a mess. But in this situation, Timber brings the ball forward into that space. Neri doesn't actually make that run. I don't really think Neri's on the same page here. He kind of wants that ball to cut inside, but Timber is not willing that to happen. He wants to carry that ball into that area, which is fine, and he just forces it. Before, he maybe make a little pass to Neri and give up, but this game he did not care. He tried to get the ball into Marino. It obviously bounced around, then he jumps in trying to win the ball back, you know, fighting for it in that last line, which I love. And eventually we get that luck, and it's something we've been saying for a long time. Arsenal need to shoot more, Arsenal need to try and score more, and just try good passes and take more risks in the final third, because sometimes your reward for your resilience will happen, and that is exactly what happened with this moment. And I do think the more he plays with people like Neri, the more he plays with people like Marino, and then you could have second runners like Rice also making great movements into the box as well, which I think is brilliant. And the crazy thing is, if you look at all the stats from Timber's game, it may not seem as impressive as I'm making it out to be, because I just think off the ball he was really key. He made 6 out of 13 passes in the game, which is quite a funny amount in the end. He obviously had 2 shots and created 1 chance in the game, but he had 3 passes into the final third, 2 out of 3 successful dribbles, 3 touches in the opposition box, and only 29 touches throughout the game, but you can see how they were mostly in them attacking areas. areas. However, saying that, he was also key defensively. 1 out of 2 tackles made, 2 interceptions, 5 defensive actions, and 5 recoveries. Still being able to run back, and he's got so much pace, is unbelievable in this game, considering his ACL injury, which saw him end up winning most of his duels. He won 7, he lost 2, he won 3 out of 3 in the air, which is brilliant for someone of his height. And that physical level that he had against Lang, more importantly, but against that PSV side, was just too much for them. They just could not deal with that from all our players, but especially Timber in this game. Now, this does mean, what do Arsenal do in the future? I don't think things are completely solved. I don't think every player in this game played brilliant. I think there were some strugglers, but ultimately you've got to admit that really did work. Arsenal took some risks in the forward areas. We had a lot more production and proactivity from them, and we didn't have to rely on Waneri or certain players. Everyone kind of chipped in the forward areas. We scored some fabulous goals, and going against United at the weekend, you want Timber to make them risks. It's going to be tough at Old Trafford. You know, Man United are going to defend a lot deeper than PSV probably will, and they won't come out against us, but even then you've got to take these risks. We have that sort of ability in our locker. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.